after trying to figure out strategies for me to be able to resolve it and kind of take control, which I do believe, like when I work with folks, we really talk about like what levers of influence do you have to be able to take control of your situation. But like my normal fixes weren't working. They weren't fixing things. And that's when I realized like this is a lot bigger than me. This is really something that I can't change. And similar to what you were saying about like you still were going into work. You still wanted change to happen. You could see the possibilities and like had that hope.
Yeah.
I had that too. And I was holding on to like the last little thread that existed of hope. And it just tore apart at one point. And I don't even know if there was necessarily like a moment. Like some people are like, oh, this one conversation was like the last straw for me. I don't think that was it. But I will tell you the relief that I felt when I had made the decision. But making that decision definitely made it much easier to show up day to day. And I was still doing my work the way I needed to, but I had completely detached from.
Right. Yeah. Wow. That itself is so incredibly powerful. So welcome to the conversation. The question we're asking ourselves today is, what if you could leave that toxic workplace without the burden of self-doubt and burnout? I'm talking with Tara Kermiet today, a leadership coaching consultant specializing in burnout recovery. My name is Tammy Dunnett, also a leadership coach, and I've invited Tara here today because we have a lot of shared interests in understanding, uncovering, and recovering from workplace bullying. So let's dive into today's conversation. She sent an email out that really resonated deeply with me, and the title was Things I Wish I Would Have Known When I Left My Toxic Job. And in there's 7 different points. We're going to talk about all of those here today. And what you just caught a glimpse of was us discussing some of the things we had learned as a result of our own journeys through toxic workplaces, dealing with bullies in the workplace. Tara, why don't you tell us a little bit about who you are?
Yeah. Well, first off, thanks for having me. I'm so excited to be here. I know we had a chance to connect earlier on my podcast, so it's nice to continue conversation and continue that connection. But for those that don't know, I'm Tara, and I am a leadership coach and consultant, and I primarily focus on burnout prevention, recovery, and workplace well-being, work-life balance, all that kind of stuff. So I take a holistic approach to my work. So I work with individuals in burnout or wanting to prevent burnout or trying to recover from burnout. So a lot of times I'm working with folks that are either trying to decide what to do in their career, whether it's a pivot time or not, or maybe they have left and they're in that in-between time and they need to heal and recover and gain some confidence back. So I work with them on that. But I also work with organizations that are genuinely committed to building people-centered workplaces. Because I firmly believe that you can be people-centered and still profit-driven. You don't have to trade one for the other.
No, and I think actually you get more profits when you're people-centered.
Absolutely you do. I mean, there's definitely research behind that.
There is. Yeah.
So I really enjoy working with organizations that are forward-thinking in how they can create that culture and environment. And I call it like building a burnout-resistant workplace, because you're going to have a much more successful workplace if you're focused on building that resistance to the things that cause burnout.
Yeah, which bullying is one of them. And I often say you're only one conversation away from creating that bully-free workplace. So we are so synergetic, is that a word? I make up words sometimes. We are connected.
Part of the fun of it.
Yeah. So let's start off with, there was something in your email that just drew me in because of my own experience, having felt like I also was quitting and giving up when I finally made the decision to stop fighting against the system, to stop fighting to make them see me for who I really was. And that was one of the 7 points that you mentioned, was the things you need to know when you leave a toxic job is that you're not giving up, but you're actually saving yourself. That was so powerful. Tell me more about that.
Yeah. So I am a high achiever. I am a people pleaser. I call myself a recovering people pleaser. Perfectionist, all that good stuff. I needed all the gold stars. I wanted all the straight A's. I wanted to be involved in all the right extracurricular activities ever since I was in elementary school. And a lot of that, I think, is part of how I grew up in my family, because I grew up as an only child. So I had a lot of attention on me, and it was basically like succeed or don't, to no fault of my parents. That's just how our family functioned. And I was pretty successful. Like, things usually came easy to me. I've never really struggled. This probably sounds like horrible to say, but like, I've never really struggled getting a job, going to school, like anything like that. Sure, it was hard, but it was never so challenging that I felt like I couldn't accomplish something. Yeah. And I've never quit anything. So I've never considered myself a quitter. I will say I did quit one thing before I quit this toxic job, and that was my doctorate program, just because it didn't align anymore and I didn't want to do it anymore. So, there's that.
Great.
But that was like the first experience. But as far as like giving my all to something and being challenged so much that I felt like I couldn't handle it, that was not a feeling that I was accustomed to.
Yeah, same.
And I mean, I was struggling. I was putting my all into everything. We had gone through a lot of restructuring, period of layoffs. So I also think I had some survivor's guilt there as well, because many of my colleagues and friends had been let go, and I was there, and here I am, like, ungrateful for the job that I have, but it was not a pleasant experience. And it took the point of my husband kind of realizing the full toll that it was having on me, on physically, mentally, emotionally, on our relationship.
Yeah.
I mean, I was just becoming somebody who was not who I am.
Yeah.
And he essentially just told me, like, you're not quitting a good job. You are saving yourself from a bad job. And that's what, like, I needed to hear in that moment, because I think up until then, like, I hadn't even seen it as a bad job, because I liked the work I was doing. If I could just sit there and focus on my day-to-day work without all the other people interactions that were causing the stress, or, the cultural influences that were causing the stress, I would have been fine. I was actually, like, 2 months before all of that mess had happened, I was gloating to my friends in other departments, like, I have the best job ever. Like, I finally found my fit here. Like, this is awesome. And then, bam, life changed really quickly. And I think that's another realization that was hard for me, was that at this point, it was out of my control. I did everything I could. And the only thing left that I could do was to step away and to save myself, because I was losing every bit of me in that process. My confidence, my physical health. Yeah. I mean, everything was deteriorating very quickly. And so I would hate now to see who I would be if I would have stayed.
If you would have stayed. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. You mentioned that really sudden shift, and I think that was connected to the restructuring. Is that right?
Yes. Yeah. We, like I said, they laid off about 30% of the workforce unexpectedly. We had been told we were doing well financially and all that, and clearly we were not. And then there were, like, trickle down layoffs for the next month or so, where it was a few more people here and there. And my department was one of the departments that was, like, completely obliterated. So, like, my supervisor had been let go. We had no leadership of our team. We were now reporting in a whole different structure, and the entire direction that we had been working on had shifted.
Yeah. Very similar to my experience. And I think so many people who are in these workspaces where it suddenly becomes toxic, it is often after a restructure in who you report to or how the organization is working. And, there's a bit of chaos that comes with it naturally. And still, leaders of people need to be leaders of people.
Well, and that's what I became so passionate about, how you handle layoffs, like from a leadership perspective.
Yes.
As someone who kind of went through this on one side, I wasn't in the layoff side, but I think we were completely left behind for those of us that were remaining. And it just was not, it was basically like how not to do a layoff versus how to do a layoff.
I think so many of us in this space have learned the how not to, and that's why we're here. We're so passionate about making change.
Yeah. But like, I'm right there with you. Like, I understand layoffs need to happen. I understand that is a part of the business culture and operations, and it's something that you kind of have to face. Like, everybody may face this at some point. I understand. What I don't understand is how you can handle it without care. Like, it can be done. It's not easy, but it can be done in the right way. Yeah. To where you show as much care as possible to the humans that are impacted. Yeah. And that's what, I mean, there was no communication. I'm not kidding when I tell you, I actually never heard from HR that my boss was let go, nor was I ever told who my new boss was going to be. I had to log into the system to figure it out.
Wow.
And I never heard from my new boss until like a month and a half after the layoffs occurred. So I was sitting there for a month and a half with no direction and not even knowing what to do. And that was another thing that I think I struggled with a lot, because I am the type of person, I worked remotely, and remote jobs for me are like the best because I am very type A. I'm going to get my work done. I'm very efficient with my work. Yeah. And this was the first time I was showing up and I didn't know what to do. I didn't care if I did it because it just felt pointless. I had no purpose. Wow. And that was killing me too, I think.
Yeah. We had talked before we got onto this call, and part of that restructuring, you had shared that there were people who recognized that you were also changing, and they were checking in with you, like asking if you were okay. And that just struck me as well, because when I was going through mine, I called them my shadow people. That the people in the shadows who didn't have the courage or the confidence or the skill to speak to the situation and advocate for what they needed would come to me as well and say, oh my God, I'm struggling too. So I don't know if they were struggling as well, or they just noticed the changes in you. Why don't you share a little bit about that?
Yeah. So when we were talking, I was stating how I had to start having meetings with a leader on the team that I didn't have interactions with prior, but because of our new reporting structure, I was meeting with him on a regular basis, and there was a lot of gaslighting happening and a lot of belittling and classic bully behavior. Yeah. And some of it I was catching on to, some of it I maybe just was hoping that I was misconstruing the message or that I was being a little bit too sensitive. So I think that that's another piece where you didn't give up. Like, you were paying attention to what was going on.
Yeah. Don't you find that we just gaslight the shit out of ourselves as well?
Oh yeah, we're the worst gaslighters.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's like that secondary trauma, I call it. So first there's the bully trauma, and then there's our own internal trauma where we are second guessing everything we've done and thinking, is it me? Like, it's horrible.
And I think some of that, at least for me, is a protective measure, because even though it's trauma and it's damaging to your well-being to gaslight yourself, there's still some control that you have in the narrative that way. And I think that for me is like how I protect myself, is to have control over the narrative. So when I had someone else gaslighting me or treating me that way, I don't have control over how they behave. I only have control over how I respond. And that's how I naturally respond. And I had to come to terms with that and start working through that myself. And that's still something that I work through day to day. I still constantly question, should I have done something different back then? Now, should I even be doing this? Maybe I should have stayed and, gone to a different department or whatever.
Yeah. So many what ifs and it's a natural part of being curious and wanting to do good. I think, especially when you're a high achiever, you're like, well, how could I have missed that sign? I should have seen it. I could have done something differently. And it's a challenge at the same time. I don't know where I was going with that thought other than that.
But I mean, yes. But yeah, so I started having folks that were in these meetings. They were witnessing the gaslighting. They were witnessing the bullying behavior. And they would reach out to me after the meeting and check in. And they're like, hey, are you okay? Like, and some would actually point blank be like, he gaslit the shit out of you. Like,
wow,
that was terrible. And I had a few people, they were like, you should go talk to HR. I honestly I never went and talked to HR because I had no faith that that would even do anything. So why bother? It just prolongs the inevitable. But to your point too of like I like what you call like the shadow people.
The shadow people, yeah.
Because there were definitely some folks that would come to me and they were struggling. It honestly felt like every meeting that I would have with a different department, we'd have to schedule an extra 15 minutes for like a venting session just because of like what they were going through. And then they'd ask how I was doing. You also had to kind of tiptoe around and determine who you trust and who who was safe to have that conversation with. I'm the type of person, I've always been this way. Like people come to me when they have problems anyway. So I'm a good listener. And I think that's why, like, they just know that they can come to me. And so I had more people come to me just with their concerns. And I don't think they came to me for me to address it for them. I think it was a lot of us were just trying to have someone to hold on to say that we're not alone.
Yeah.
And to build that community.
That's what I thought too. You know, like when I started talking to people trying to figure out a solution, because I was very much about let's solve this problem. And I think the reason why that part about you didn't give up, you saved yourself, stood out to me the most is because when I finally gave up, I thought I was quitting, right? I was like raising my white flag saying, you win, I can't fight anymore, because my body too gave up on me before my mind or my spirit was willing to do that. Because I also kept showing up in this damn workplace that was hurting me, insisting that they see my value and my worth that I had before the restructuring. Because it's the same kind of trigger. Boss before that, I was on the fast track to promotion, right? New boss, I'm all of a sudden the scum at the bottom of the barrel. And I was like, how did this happen? I haven't changed.
Right.
And so when I couldn't fight anymore, when my body, I was on 4 stress leaves. I don't know if you have stress leave where you live, but medically they write you off work so you can go and heal and start to recover and repair. 4 times I had to go off, and each time was longer because the work wasn't happening in the relationship. It was always that medical, let's look at the symptoms you're having: anxiety, you can't sleep, the noise in your head never stops. Like, so let's treat that first, and then we'll put you back into the workplace and see if that's fixed anything. But nothing was happening here in the organization. And so as I became, I was a nurse before, and I thought I was doing a really good job with these patients when they come in with these symptoms and these struggles, and we would give them these medications to help them sleep. I felt like we were doing our job. But then when I became the patient in the system and I saw the gap, I was like, what the F is this? I need help over here with this person. We shouldn't be at the point where I need medications for sleep. We should never get to the point where I have to have medications to keep me calm and not anxious to work in a place that hurts me. So when I read that point about you're not giving up, you're saving yourself, I thought, oh my God, it wasn't in the moment I could see that. It was only in hindsight that I realized when I waved that white flag and said, you win, I cannot fight anymore, that my attention shifted from making them see me differently, and it focused back on me as how do I heal? How do I move forward? And that's when my life changed.
Yeah. Oh, there's so much power in that too, of the levers of influence that you have, and making, trying, no longer focusing on making them see you how you want to be seen, but making yourself see you how you want to be seen.
It wasn't instant. Like, for those who are listening, that was not instant. That waving of the flag thing, I felt like I had quit for a long, long time. And it took years of doing what I needed to do, therapy, exercise, all that stuff, advocating for a new workplace. Like I just refuse. This is in the military. You just can't not go to work, right?
Yeah.
You have to show up or you go to jail. So those are my choices. Stay home and then the MPs come arrest you, or go to work and try to figure it out.
Yeah.
So
And
it
I
took a
think,
long time.
you know, not everybody's in that situation where if they don't show up to work, they'll get arrested, but
I know.
they have to go to work
bill.
for other reasons. Like they
Yeah.
need to pay bills. They have to
Exactly.
support their family, you know, all that stuff. We can't just quit. And I think
know.
that's why I felt at first like I was giving up, but I realized I wasn't. And
I love
you
that
know,
your husband gave you that reframe that
oh
you
my
needed
gosh.
in that moment.
Yeah. He has been my rock in all of this. Like I can't.
Yeah.
I mean, I couldn't have done it regardless without him, but having that moment was huge. But one thing I want to point out, like, first off, I love that you have stress leave.
Yes.
We do not have that.
Let's advocate for that.
I have
Powers it be.
I've always called them mental health days, but they're just, you know, time off. Like,
No, yeah.
it's not really an official thing, but no, some companies do have those. But your example is exactly why I always say, like, you can't self-care, you can't vacation, you can't nap your way out of burnout.
Yeah.
Because you can take as much time off as you need to get the rest and to really focus on the symptoms, like you were saying, of what you're experiencing. But as soon as you go back to that same environment, if nothing has changed, it's probably going to be worse now. Because your nervous system has regulated a little bit, which is a good thing. We want that to happen. But now you're going to amp up that fight or flight even more as soon as you come back to it.
Yeah.
And so that's why I approach my work in both kind of individual and organizational perspectives, because I can give the individual as much tools as possible. I learned, like, I can I always say, we were making up words earlier, like I always therapize. Like I can therapize myself 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. But I can't change a culture and environment on my own as much as I want to. I can influence it, but I can't change it. And if it doesn't change,
it's still true.
You got to figure out, like, do you stay or do you go at some point?
I love what you just shared there, because I always say leaving is not healing. That was like number one thing in your email. So I want to run through these and make sure we hit all of them, because they were gold. I thought quitting my toxic job would feel like freedom. I thought the same thing until I got into the next job. And it was a couple of years later, but then all of a sudden somebody said something, sounded like my bully of the past. And I was off on 2 weeks, just like that. Just as you're showing, your nervous system is regulated, but it's still hypervigilant now when you go into these places. I didn't know in the background, that software operating system in the background was looking for those threats all the time. I thought I was healed.
Yeah. And our subconscious has so much power. Like, I am not a neuroscientist by any means, but like, our subconscious holds on to trauma and to those triggers. And like you said, it picks up on it without you maybe even realizing it.
Yeah.
And it may take a few times, too, for it to have the physical reaction for you to notice. I'm very similar. Like, I actually realized why, and this took a couple months after I left the toxic job. I realized why the leader that I was meeting with was such a trigger for me. Because even, like, just his name popping up on a meeting, I would be having a panic attack before the meeting would even start.
Wow.
And I realized, after really doing some reflection, that the way he behaved reminded me and resembled the first job that I had, where I was working at colleges and universities at that point. And the college president for whatever reason, was like threatened by me. And I don't know if it was because the students really liked me and they did not like him. They made it very clear they did not like him.
Yeah.
Or if it was because I was younger and new at my job, but like he was coming at me for a lot of things.
Wow.
And the way he talked to me was very similar to the way that leader was talking to me. But I didn't know it at the time.
Yeah.
It took some time after, once I kind of removed myself from the situation, to realize like, oh, that trauma still sat with me from, 12 plus years ago.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So interesting. And that kind of leads to the next one where you talk about your body is going to freak out.
Oh my gosh.
And you talk about how like, you always flinched at notifications on your phone. And I had the same thing because even when I was on my stress leave, as we talked about, my harasser would email me at home.
Oh my
I couldn't
gosh.
answer my phone. I couldn't look at my computer. I couldn't walk down my block because I was afraid. Like I worked myself into quite a place. I was afraid she would be there because I had gotten so scared to see her. She represented everything bad and evil in the world for my life.
Yeah. And I think, that's, first off, that's awful to have to go through that.
I agree.
And like, for me, I was having a lot of physical responses during the climax of the stress, right?
Yeah.
Like I definitely, I mentioned I was having panic attacks. I get migraines anyways, but these migraines were to a whole different level. I was having digestive issues that I've never had before. I was just generally sick, and I'm not usually a sick person. Yeah. And I realized that like my nervous system was shot. Like I was not taking care of myself how I should because I just couldn't. Everything was depleted. I had no ability to do that. But yeah, I had physical reactions. I still have physical reactions. Like I'm my own boss and I get a panic when I get an email. And I'm like, why am I panicking? Who's emailing me? Nobody's emailing me. It's usually just a newsletter. Like, don't panic. It sits. But even afterwards, I have aftershocks is what I call them, of like panic attacks before, like if I have important meetings with clients, and I love working with people. That's the whole reason why I'm doing what I'm doing. Yeah. But I still will have an aftershock of like panic before I log on to the meeting, even though there's no reason for it beyond just my body still remembers that trauma. Yeah.
And I've noticed, I felt it in myself as well. And I don't know if it's just the synergy that's here, but as you talk, I noticed the swallow and the almost
the closing of the throat
with it. Yeah. Right. Because the body is still working through it. I still get that too.
Yeah. 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 And it's like, as soon as you start talking about a really difficult situation, your body immediately goes back into that moment.
Yeah.
And I may not remember details.
Sorry.
Oh, I was just going to say, I may not remember details, but like my body does. And it remembers exactly what the heck happened.
I think it was, as you shared that, it took me back to the first time I did a keynote on workplace bullying. And I walked into the hotel. And this is probably, I'm trying to think how many years since, let's say 6 years, approximately 6 years since I had seen or heard of my bully. I walk into this hotel. She's in the dang hotel. And I walk right past her to give my keynote. My body just was like instantly shaking and trembling. And I thought, holy crap, this is the first time I'm going to talk publicly about my experience with her. And she's in the building. I don't even know what I thought actually at the moment, but I'm thinking now. I went up to the person who hired me. I had an hour before I was to go on. I was closing keynote for this session, Alberta Occupational Health Nurses. And I went to her and I said, you're not going to believe this. I just saw my bully and I'm like triggered. And I wasn't expecting that. She goes, what do you need? I'm like, I think I'll be okay. But when I go up there and talk, I'm going to be more emotional than I expect. And so I let the audience know that right away. Because I knew I was going to tell my story and I would probably now feel like I want to cry or get like really emotional. Like it's a wave that comes over you.
Yeah.
And they were so supportive and so appreciative that I just set that stage before I talked. But in hindsight, I'm like, that was a sign from the universe to me. I like to look at universe signs that I was ready to talk and move forward from this and take the cover off of it. Because not only was she there and she triggered me, I was still able to deliver that closing keynote.
Yeah. And think about how much like power you took over that entire situation just in that moment.
Yeah.
Even by claiming
she was
like
in the room, but she wasn't. She was in the conference next door. Thank goodness. That would have been a totally different ballgame.
But even just telling the audience like, hey, this is where I'm at in this moment right now.
Yeah.
That gives, you're taking control of the narrative and you're taking control of the environment. And that, to me, that probably made your speech
so much
10
more
times
impactful.
better.
Yeah. It did. For them as well. Even for me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
So I know we're getting close to, like, we've been chatting for a while and our time is coming to an end. There were some things I wrote down that I thought we both experienced. And I think for those who are listening and wondering, am I in a toxic workplace? These might be some signs for them. So I'm going to share with you what I wrote down. There was a triggering event in that there was a restructure, a new boss come in, which shifted how you were seen and how you experienced being an employee. Other people around you were able to see it. And I don't know, I didn't see it in myself at first either. I just knew that I was doing what I thought good people would do in a workplace by speaking into these moments and asking for better as people. But others around me could see it as well. Then there were changes in self, in your, there were gut problems. You start to notice that you're feeling anxious in workplace, but that you continue to pursue and to continue to show up, even in spite of that. And this one, I started this one, is that the strategies I had before weren't working now. And I think if anybody is wondering, am I in a toxic workplace? If you've got a new trigger, which has maybe changed the dynamic in your relationship, if other people are seeing changes in yourself, but maybe you don't see them yet, if you're noticing physical symptoms that aren't your normal way of showing up, and if your usual strategies are not working, you might be in a toxic workplace.
Yeah. Yeah. I'd add too, and these are like, classic signs of burnout, but if you're wanting to detach from work, like even if it's just like you show up to work, you're giving your all, but then after work, you're a vegetable and you're just couch rotting for the rest of the day because you literally put every ounce of energy that you had into surviving your job.
Yeah.
That to
really
me is a sign that something is wrong. Or if you're typically like I had mentioned earlier, like I loved my job, like the actual job description of what I was doing, but I started hating it and dreading certain things. And when that started happening, it was a little aha moment for me too. Yeah. That something ain't right here.
And we know not all workplaces are like this. Thank goodness. There are places we can go and show up in our authentic selves, our high performance self, contribute and add value and not experience this. So I think that's important. People need to know that too. Is that you share this too in your email, which prompted me to reach out to you for this conversation, is that you're going to miss it. It's a reason why a lot of people stay in. I love the work. You shared that I love the work. If I could just do that without the people, that'd be great. If you're saying that to yourself right now, you may want to reach out to Tara or myself for sure to have a conversation.
Yeah.
And I know so many people who stay and still are in jobs that they love the job, hate the culture, and their lives at home, less quality, lower quality, less joy, less happiness.
Yeah. And you're gonna miss pieces of it because you took the job for a reason in the first place. Chances are you're connected to someone there. You have a strong connection with some colleagues there. If you don't, it's another sign probably that there's some struggles there with the culture. But I even missed, and this is more probably specific to my situation, but like I missed the structure of having that because now I work on my own, and I luckily mentioned earlier, I'm type A. I can create my own structure. I don't need help with that. But I do miss having some formality to the work
I do too sometimes.
And this ties to the quitting thing too, I think. Like you didn't quit, but or give up. I miss being able to easily answer the question of like, what do you do? Now I'm much better at that because I have a plan and I know what I'm doing. But when I first left, I had an idea of a plan. I didn't necessarily have a full-fledged plan, and I was still figuring it out. And I knew what I wanted to loosely do. Like I wanted to help people not go through what I went through, or at least recover from it. But I didn't know how I was going to solidify that into a business necessarily right away. And I missed having that piece because it was part of my identity. And I lost that part of my identity when I left. But I gained such a better piece of my identity. And I've grown so much from recognizing that. And so it's okay to miss some of those pieces. That doesn't mean that it wasn't toxic. That doesn't mean that it wasn't, a traumatic experience. That doesn't mean that it's not going to trigger you in the future. But it's okay to miss pieces of it too and recognize that there were some good pieces to it.
Yeah, honor the good stuff. I miss teaching some days. I thought that was my favorite job. I loved teaching nursing students. Passion on passion on passion. Like not only just nursing students, but adults who are impacting other people's lives through communication and all the stuff that nurses have to know. Let's wrap this up with your last tip that you sent in the email. It's so beautifully written. Leaving a toxic job is hard. Healing is even harder. More importantly, what I like here is that you wrote, if you take nothing else from this email, so if you're not on Tara's email list, get on her email list. If you're not following her, follow her. And I'll put your links wherever this video is going to go. But this is what I really like. And I have experienced this too. If you take nothing else from this, hear me on this. You will find yourself again. And when you do, you'll wonder why you ever questioned this decision in the first place.
I got goosebumps just thinking about it.
I know, because we've journeyed this road together, individually, in our own ways. But it's such an important thing for people to hear, because when you're in it, you're in it. You can't see that that's the possibility for your future to come.
Yeah. And I recognize, especially, I'm in America and our job environment is like, I can't speak to other countries. I'm not as well versed, but like it is tough, and it is only going to get tougher because of all of the federal government layoffs that are happening.
Everything that's happening, it's affecting the world.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I not only lost my self-confidence because of everything that I was experiencing with the bullying, with the toxicity, just with the complete and utter shakeup of everything that I knew and was comfortable with at work, but I was applying to jobs, more jobs than I've ever applied to, and I was not getting them. I wasn't even getting interviews. And that was crushing me even more. So that was adding weight to all of it.
Yeah.
But this is where I try to encourage folks, like, things happen for a reason. And I firmly believe that. Like, I believe in the universe giving us what we need and shepherding us in the right direction of where we need to go. And like now, I know I was meant to do this because I'm very passionate about it. I mean, I think you can tell just by talking about it. Like, this is what I love to do. And I get to meet people like you that are along this same mission of really trying to make a difference for people. And when I think about why I went into all the other roles that I've had, that was kind of core to who I was. I am now more familiar with my values than I've ever been because I've been forced to take that time and reflect. And that's why I think, like, you are being shepherded in the right direction. And I think we had talked about this before, of having some sense of gratitude for going through the tough times, because I reckon, like, you recognize what you learned from those.
Yeah.
And that's why I ended it that way because I know it can be discouraging. And especially if you're in a situation where you can't necessarily walk away right away, you don't have as much control over the things that you wish you had control over.
Yeah.
You feel like you've lost yourself, but there is opportunity to get yourself back.
It is waiting for you to make that decision, right? You mentioned that before, like when you made the decision, I make a decision and my protective mechanisms, I had to let go of things. It's that decision that will change everything. Even if it was like when I thought that decision to stop fighting, I didn't know that was the decision I needed to make to move forward.
Yeah.
The decision is very powerful. So thank you so much. We started out this conversation by saying, what if you could walk away from a toxic workplace without carrying the burden of self-doubt and burnout? So I think this has been incredibly valuable, not just for you and I to connect, because I think we share a lot of experiences and insights and passion in the world, but for those who are listening, also to see themselves maybe in this situation, to hear that others have walked through it and have made better lives out of that experience, but also to give them hope. Yeah, because it can feel like a pretty hopeless place when you're in it.
Sure can.
So thanks for joining me. Where can people find you?
Yeah. So I am on pretty much all of the social medias, as I like to say. You can find me. I'm mostly active on LinkedIn, and just find me at Tara, Tara. Last name's Kermiet, Kermiet. That's also my website, tarakermiet.com. I'm on TikTok at Tara Kermiet. I'm on Instagram at Tara Kermiet.
We got that name trademarked.
Yes. No one can take my name.
That's right.
But also, I do host the Balanced Badass podcast. So I like to talk all things about keeping, a balanced badass life and figuring that out together. And I do solo episodes. I do joint guest episodes. So would love for folks to listen there too.
Awesome. Thanks so much. This is not the end of our conversations, end of this one, but we are definitely staying connected and we'll have lots to share.
Yes. Awesome.
Work. Yeah.
Thank you.